juste pour pouvoir suivre ce qu'il disait. Et cette expérience de lâcher le mental, juste pour mieux comprendre, eh bien vraiment se le rappeler et refaire cela demain, tranquillement, c'est-à-dire se rappeler ce qui s'est passé et le lâcher. Et juste voyons ce qui émerge quand on fait, ça s'appelle la contemplation, ça s'appelle comprendre son expérience. Et puis aussi tenter la méditation pour ceux et celles qui ne la pratiquent pas encore, que ce soit de la façon dont l'a exprimé Mathieu ce matin, Mathieu Ricard, ou tout simplement en restant en silence 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes tranquillement, et puis se mettre à se rappeler ce qui s'est passé et lâcher son mental.
What about you, Robert, when you have to face the skeptic inquiry, the skeptic discussion? How do you stay calm? How do you stay open to consciousness in this world?
Well, I think this is what's happening in these changes in worldview are a part of a large cultural transition, and all of us here are part of that process. And you don't, there's a kind of paradigm war going on. I mean, Elizabeth has tried to move us beyond this to seeing that it doesn't have to be a kind of struggle for power, but that's not the way our opponents see it. And there is a kind of conflict going on, and there are active groups of skeptics and militant atheists and others who are actively opposing this change in worldview. For me, I'm one of their primary targets, but for me, this is, if I took it personally, it would be devastating. I don't take it personally because I think that it's part of a larger process. And I myself gain a lot of help from people who support me and who love me, my family first and foremost, and that is very stabilizing. I also pray on a daily basis as well as meditating, and prayer is more about the daily things. If I'm angry about somebody, then I pray to be given the grace to forgive them, because otherwise resentment becomes a kind of corrosion of the soul. And because I'm a practicing Christian, so I gain a lot of strength from going to churches and praying. For example, when I arrived in Paris yesterday, I went to Notre Dame first to pray there and for ask for blessings on my time in Paris and on all our time here together. And luckily, in churches, we have these beautiful churches in every city in Europe and indeed in most cities in the world. And you can go and light a candle. You don't have to go to service. You don't have to sign up to the creed. But you can light a candle and pray in a sacred place that links you to where people have prayed for many centuries. And it means that you have a kind of strength of connection that is sustaining and helpful. So for me, for one thing, is this sense of connection and help through the Christian tradition, through sacred places. In India, I go to temples and do offerings. It's not that I think every religion has its path, but I happen to follow a Christian one. And so that for me is a great sense of strength and indeed of inspiration.
Thank you. Alan, what would be your practical advice to keep this energy we get today?
Well, we'd all like to do something heroic, I think, if we could, and it would be effective, something large in the world, but most of us are not positioned to do that. Some politicians are. My dear wife, Julie, here is a politician, and she's like Rupert. She gets a lot of crap thrown at her for doing good work and continuing to try to do good work. But the answer that often comes to mind for me is one I got from the American theologian who recently died, but mentioned before, Thomas Berry, who was asked this by a group of students, as I've been asked many times, what can I do? And his answer was, there's work for everyone. No matter where you work or what you do, there's work to do. Whether you're a writer, or whether you're a carpenter, or whether you're a politician, or whether you polish windows or run the bus, there's work to do. There's ways to do it that express an inner spirit of goodwill, love, and caring for others. I guess the second part of that question, how do you keep connected? Well, you don't have any choice. If you start doing this, as I think almost everyone here knows, other people will find you. And you will find them. And you will find yourself part of networks that are doing good work, whatever that work is, taking care of orphans, taking care of lost dogs, volunteering your time to create public art in the parks and so on. So, my answer is, we do whatever we do, but do it in this sort of caring spirit.
Christine, j'aurais aimé que vous partagiez peut-être avec nous une expérience qui vous a le plus frappé dans votre travail auprès d'entreprises, une expérience d'éveil, une expérience inattendue qui s'est passée à travers votre travail de management. Est-ce que vous avez d'accompagnement, est-ce que vous avez quelque chose qui vous est particulièrement marqué?
Je pense que je fais référence aux ateliers de ce midi. Nous étions dans l'atelier Violet 119. Et finalement, ce que j'ai vécu dans cet atelier ce midi, c'était la même chose que ce que l'on vit dans les entreprises lorsqu'un groupe de personnes se réunit avec de la bonne volonté pour pouvoir découvrir quelque chose de nouveau. Et l'expérience est toujours la même et en même temps toujours mystérieuse et magnifique. C'est-à-dire qu'il y a le moment extraordinaire où lorsque tout le monde est ensemble, uni, et cherche quelque chose de nouveau, on devient un. Et on sait qu'on est un, c'est plus des petites cellules qui travaillent ou des petits groupes qui travaillent séparés les uns des autres, mais ça devient un groupe. Et à un moment donné, ça a été dit d'ailleurs dans la restitution de notre atelier, à un moment donné, on avait même conscience des groupes. C'est-à-dire que nous avions conscience des 500 personnes ici qui travaillaient dans des ateliers. Et je trouve que peut-être ce qui me frappe le plus, c'est d'un côté cette constance, cette découverte permanente du rien, du un, du lien, de quelque chose qui ne bouge pas, qui est absolument solide, qui n'a pas de doute, qui a une entière confiance dans la vie, et en même temps, le côté popcorn qui a été dit tout à l'heure, le côté...
C'est des popcorn. Le côté nouveau qui émerge, le côté vibration qui émerge, l'envie d'un seul coup de découvrir qu'on peut travailler ensemble. Et ça, dans les entreprises, c'est exactement la même expérience. Quand on découvre d'un seul coup qu'on n'est pas simplement des équipes qui travaillons les uns contre les autres ou pour notre bonus personnel, mais qu'à un moment donné, on peut trouver un but commun dans l'entreprise, alors il se passe quelque chose de merveilleux et le management commence à changer et on peut commencer à manager ensemble l'entreprise, plus les uns contre les autres. Cela suppose également de la maturation, comme c'était décrit tout à l'heure, c'est-à-dire qu'à un moment donné, il faut que le management aussi accepte de lâcher prise sur le command and control, le fait de toujours commander, contrôler, prévoir, accepte l'incertitude et aussi arrive avec une mission pour l'entreprise. Parce que nous-mêmes, nous n'allons pas nous engager dans quelque chose qui ne va pas nous convenir. Et les nouvelles générations le montrent très bien, c'est-à-dire que les jeunes générations s'engagent lorsque le but en vaut la peine. Sinon, elles ne s'engagent pas. Donc ça amène une maturation différente en termes de management. Et rien n'est différent de ce qu'on a vécu dans les ateliers cet après-midi. C'est exactement la même chose. Je crois qu'il y a des questions dans la salle, donc je ne vais pas abuser du micro. Juste une dernière question, Rupert. Vous travaillez dans ce champ, vous avez apporté une contribution colossale à l'évolution des consciences autour de notre perception de la réalité et du monde. Ça fait pas mal de décennies que vous faites ce travail-là. Est-ce que vous avez observé un changement dans les gens qui vous écoutent et qui viennent vous entendre? Est-ce que les gens que vous avez en face de vous aujourd'hui sont les mêmes que ceux qui venaient il y a 20 ans, 30 ans? Enfin, peut-être pas aussi loin, mais...
Well, no, I've seen a big change, especially in the last 2 years. I think things are changing faster now than I've ever seen them change before. And I think it's because so many people realize that the present model doesn't work. The economic system doesn't work very well. The balance of global power, it doesn't work very well. Just bombing people in the Middle East doesn't work very well. And the mechanistic medical system is good, but it has severe limitations. I think there's a huge change. For me, the most significant example of this was I was in Los Angeles 3 weeks ago, and I was asked by somebody called Joe Rogan to talk on his podcast, do an interview with him. I'd never heard of Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, it turns out, is a cult figure in the world of UFC, Ultimate Fighting Championship, a new mixed martial arts fighting form which is spreading through the world. He has a huge following, 18 million downloads of his podcast per month. And he was very keen to interview me, and I didn't know who he was, but he persuaded me in the end, and I went to Los Angeles a bit earlier to meet him, and I didn't know what to expect. There was a stuffed wolf in his office when I walked in. It turned out that Joe Rogan is somebody who's really into the art of fighting, the concentration of mind needed to fight. And he's got interested in consciousness studies. He takes, or is interested in psychedelics, ayahuasca, DMT. And this has made him extremely interested in consciousness studies and looking for a different way of seeing the world. His following of young men, mostly under 35, millions of them around the world, seem to share these interests. And now at my events in London in the last 2 or 3 weeks, amidst the more usual kind of audience, there are a lot of sort of young alpha male types with bulging muscles and black t-shirts, who are extremely interested in these things. We've now got a whole kind of alpha male contingent on our side that wasn't there until a few weeks ago. The interest I find among younger people, particularly among students who are aware that the present systems don't work and aware that what they're being taught in most universities is old paradigm and simply not up to speed on the kinds of changes we're talking about here. A much greater openness than I've ever seen before, in all levels of society, actually.
Alors, je crois qu'il y a des... Oui, on peut. Je crois qu'il y a une question, enfin il y a plusieurs questions dans la salle. Comment procède-t-on? Où est le micro? Là. Ici, d'accord. Alors, je profite de ces 2 secondes pour vous partager un petit truc perso. Oui? Comment? J'ai vu des... Bon, je partagerai plus tard.
Moi, je voulais juste une petite précision. Est-ce que vous pourriez nous préciser ce qu'on entend par intelligence collective et par conscience collective?
Vous posiez la question à quelqu'un en particulier?
Collectif.
Who wants to deal with that?
No.
No. Yes?
Yes.
Oh, I have to talk louder. Well, the question is, what's the difference collective intelligence and collective consciousness? They're very similar. I don't think they're the same thing, though. I don't know exactly what collective intelligence is, but you can imagine a group of people get together and brainstorm and create an idea together, or ideas together, or art together, or music, or whatever. Collective consciousness could be involved with that, but it doesn't have to be. Collective consciousness is a sense of unified consciousness. For example, I spent many years as an American Quaker. I guess I'm officially still an American Quaker. And one day, one Sunday, we had a meeting. Quakers, you know, like to meet in some quiet place. In this case, it was out in the woods, in a small Quaker meeting house. And they always leave the door open so people can come or go. In this case, it was usually the dog. But at the end of the meeting, everyone got up and looked at each other. Now, these are traditional silent meetings. And we all realized that we had had what's called a gathered meeting. A gathered meeting in Quaker world is when you have a sense of real palpable unity with everyone in the room. And it's not about language, it's underneath language. It's very real, it's very uplifting. Nobody knows how to create it, but when it happens, it's like a miracle. You can read a book, I guess the English translation is called Wizard of the Upper Amazon. It's an old classic, you've heard of this. It's about the anthropologist that wrote it, spent some time with an Amazonian culture that takes a particular potion, drug, that creates collective visions. So all be sitting around the fire, and in will come an animal, a panther or whatever it is, jaguar, and walk through the camp. Everybody sees it. It's a hallucination, if you like, or a vision's probably better. So that's collective consciousness. So collective consciousness is something a little bigger and different, but if you put problem solving together with it, I imagine you could get a pretty strong combination. Thank you.
Can I add something? I'll suggest an exercise that some of you might be able to create some collective consciousness. How many of you have children in school? Children in school. Good, lots of you. Try, when the school invites parents to watch any kind of a competition where there are two teams making points, see if you can get the school in advance to say to the children and whoever is teaching the game to do it exactly as they always have. But then while the teams are preparing to come out into the playground or field, somebody instructs the audience of parents that tonight they're going to cheer differently, that they're going to cheer for every point made by both teams on the grounds that the two teams are competing in order to drive excellence, and that you are applauding this excellence, and at the end of the game, the team that makes a few more points will take the other team out, make a party for them for driving them to greater excellence. No child will go home crying, and the parents will have an experience of shifting into a cooperative mode. And I bet if there were some way to measure it, you would find a collective consciousness event had happened. So anything you can think up to get people to experience the advantages of cooperation, brainstorm together with your friends and stuff, and think of other ways of giving people cooperative experiences that they don't expect. You might want to look at a website called the Co-Intelligence Network, where there are lots of examples of such games.
Question par ici.
Donc, bonjour. Oui, alors je voulais poser une question sur les soins énergétiques. Ce que vous pensiez des soins énergétiques tels que le Reiki. Et autre chose aussi, c'est que pensez-vous des enfants indigo et cristallins? On en parle assez souvent et je voulais avoir votre avis.
Est-ce que vous vous adressez à quelqu'un en particulier?
Non.
Peut-être, Stat? The energy healing, Reiki, what do you think?
Energy healing, Reiki, yes. I mean, there are many modes of energy healing, and all of them have some advantages in work, and I would encourage you all to explore those, to become aware of yourselves as this whole keyboard of matter, energy, consciousness, spirit, and take care of your energy. Get lots of sleep and, and engage in some of these energy practices. As for the children, yes, I am a believer in voluntary incarnation, not in being dropped into the world unintentionally, but being here as volunteers. And teachers are starting to, for some years now, have talked about children, even in kindergarten, who do group projects without talking. And they're clearly in communion with each other. And I don't know about the distinction between the crystal children and the indigo children. I would not like to particularly label groups the way we like to label some are better than others, but to recognize that many unemployed angels who have found employment in a human body are coming in to help at this time of these immense crises, and to encourage these children in what we used to say, that's just your imagination, seeing fairies in the garden and stuff like that. I just came from Findhorn, where all the grown-ups see the fairies in the garden. Don't discourage children's imagination. Don't try to teach them the difference between fact and fiction. Take seriously what their experience is. In my adopted son Puma's Quechua culture in the Andes, reality is defined as everyone's experience. And the social rule is, tell me your experience truly, don't distort it to manipulate me, and I will accept it as your experience without having to make it my reality. This kind of tolerance is what we need for a global family, to value and welcome our diversity of experience. And one psychiatrist said, 90% of arguments couples have would disappear if you would allow for each other to have different experiences without engaging in all the bullying matches to make the other person see it your way. So that's another practice you can use.
Voilà des bons conseils. Oui, tout là-haut, je crois.
Oui, bonjour, j'avais une question en particulier pour Rupert Sheldrake. Il a dit tout à l'heure qu'il était chrétien. Je suis chrétienne aussi. Il a dit qu'il était très critiqué par la communauté scientifique et qu'il était visé particulièrement. Je voulais savoir si du côté des chrétiens, quelles étaient ses réactions en fait à ces théories par rapport au champ morphique. Est-ce qu'on voit justement un éveil évolutionnaire chez les chrétiens?
Well, I'm a member of the Church of England, and it's a very tolerant church. I have many discussions about these things with fellow Christians in England. And I recently gave a workshop with the Bishop of California, who's the Bishop of Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, at the Esalen Institute in California, on spiritual practices and scientific intuition. I found him extremely open-minded, adventurous. It was really fun doing this with him. I've also done a couple of books with Matthew Fox, who's an American theologian. He used to be a Dominican, now he's an Anglican. One of them is being reissued next week, The Physics of Angels. The other one is called Natural Grace, Dialogues on Science and Spirituality. And I've found that some of the most exciting conversations I've had in the last few years have been with open-minded Christians. When I'm talking to scientific colleagues, I can talk about the science, but they usually don't want to talk about a spiritual dimension. And they don't actually, most of them don't have much knowledge of the Western philosophical or spiritual tradition. So I've found actually the most exciting areas of exploration are precisely with fellow Christians. Also with Buddhists and with Hindus. But for me, the ones that are the most juicy are the Christian ones, because there's an openness in Christianity is a kind of evolutionary belief. I'm not referring to the kind of Protestant fundamentalism which tries to relate everything to the fixed word of the Bible, but to the ongoing tradition of the churches like the Roman Catholic and the Anglican Church, which are based on the belief that there's an evolution through the ages. It's not a matter of staying the same, it's a matter of developing and changing. So, and within the Church of England, we now have women priests, we have women bishops, and of course, since the 16th century, we've had married priests. So there's also a social evolution going on, as well as a kind of spiritual evolution and a willingness to engage with science and with the big open questions of our time. In my own parish church in Hampstead in London, I'm on really good relationships, have good relationships with most people there, some of whom have different views from me, but there's no sense of argumentation, of kind of angry argumentation. There's more a matter of open-minded exploration.
Il y a un monsieur devant là qui demande le micro, s'il peut redescendre vers le sud. Ah, voilà.
Bonsoir, merci pour tous ces échanges. J'ai une question sur les phases de transition. Est-ce que de vos observations du monde, de vos expériences personnelles éventuellement, du monde de l'entreprise, est-ce que ces phases de transition sont obligatoirement violentes? Est-ce qu'elles sont obligatoirement liées uniquement à la loi de nécessité? Et qu'est-ce qui peuvent les soutenir, voire les accélérer?
Oh, the last question is very good. What can speed up these transitions? Disasters. Every time there's a natural disaster, whether it's flood or fire, tsunami, earthquake, whatever, almost all the people who suffer this disaster cooperate immediately with no training. In Fukushima, it was 100%. In most places, it's over 95%. Maybe a little bit of looting, a little bit of opportunism at first, and then it very quickly moves into cooperation, which tells me that it's in us. It's in us spiritually, morphically, in our blood and bones, you know, to cooperate. And I think that is because tribal peoples already went through these maturation phases in many cases. So we've been told that it's our human nature just to be competitive, but you can see that it isn't true. And I wish it were otherwise, but the disasters are going to come like popcorn effect. Since we're talking about popcorn, they are going to get faster and faster. And scientists would love to have everything work on nice, smooth, predictable curves. Now, you can predict that this planet is going to get hotter than it is now, but you cannot predict the daily weather, and you cannot predict which location is going to get a tsunami when. But we will eventually find 13 of the largest 20 cities in the world, being at sea level, will be flooded out. And so we can predict with a considerable high probability that we're going to have people by the millions as refugees. Now, I was just at the Boom Festival in Portugal. Was anyone else there? Big music festival, I see a hand up, with 42,000 people in a place that had no infrastructure, where they used composting toilets, and quickly, through the heating up of the poo enclosed boxes and then putting worms in them, could transform that into fertilizer for permaculture gardens. All the gray water from over 100 food concessions were cleaned through reed beds that were planted in advance. All the fairyland lighting at night for the most wonderful sculptures and buildings was solar energy collected during the daytime. And to my surprise then, a music festival of people from 150 countries coming together, 42,000 strong. I didn't expect to find the sustainability information there for fairly rapid conversion of poo to food, you know, and things like that. So disasters are going to happen, and we must prepare for them, to prepare for supply line interruptions, to build our communities strong, whether they're urban communities. There's loads of information online for growing food in urban situations. and for collectively getting windmills or solar collectors or whatever you need for community. So the crises are coming through the natural world, through our interventions in the natural world, and we must not be afraid of them. So know yourself as an eternal being. The worst thing that can happen is you lose your body. You still get to be around, okay? So lose the fear, go into community with enthusiasm, and don't panic about the crises. Even very high military people now are saying that global warming is a more serious threat to humanity than terrorism. Yay, finally we're gonna, shift things a little and say, okay, let's all face this. We've done a dozen ice ages, we can do a hot age. It's only as much hotter during a hot age from what we think of as normal as ice ages were colder. There are as many people living in deserts today as there are Europeans. That big a population is already living in deserts, and thousands of years ago people figured out how to live in deserts comfortably. So we can do this thing, people, we can do this thing, but we've got to welcome it and get cooperative.
Je voulais répondre en même sens, d'une façon un tout petit peu différente, pas forcément en réalisant qu'il y a des désastres, mais aussi en étant inspiré à vouloir créer un monde meilleur pour les générations futures. Mais lorsque je l'en parle, c'est vraiment le voir depuis sa propre posture, c'est-à-dire réaliser que chacun d'entre nous, par nos propres choix, en se transformant, on transforme des dizaines et des dizaines de personnes autour de nous, et ça va très vite. Et mon expérience, c'est que c'est pas en faisant peur des désastres qui arrivent, parce qu'il faut vraiment que les désastres arrivent pour que les gens commencent à bouger. Je pense fondamentalement qu'on peut vraiment faire évoluer la conscience avant les désastres, en inspirant, en s'inspirant les uns les autres, en montrant un futur positif et en montrant que finalement ce futur n'est pas loin, il est à l'intérieur de chacun d'entre nous. C'est une question de choix qu'on peut avoir maintenant, et en agissant à partir de maintenant, on partage, puisque ce qu'on nous a démontré aujourd'hui, c'est que la conscience est une. Donc on a cette capacité à démultiplier à une vitesse qui est incroyable, mais on peut démultiplier le positif versus attendre le désastre et devoir répondre au désastre. Donc je crois concrètement et sincèrement et profondément que des journées comme celle-ci et toutes les actions que vous pouvez avoir autour de vous à partir de cette journée comme aujourd'hui a un effet sur la conscience qui est immense. Ça peut même parfois être mesuré, hein. Il y a des grands événements mondiaux parfois qui mesurent un niveau de conscience qui bouge, mais en réalité, si on maintient ce niveau de conscience à partir de maintenant, la conscience évolue et continuera à évoluer. Et là, on ira beaucoup plus vite que les désastres.
Je rebondis très, très brièvement, si tu permets, Eric, parce que je suis assez frappé que cette question justement de la crise, de la peur, des transformations de notre société surviennent. Depuis des semaines, on est à l'INREES en train de travailler sur le prochain hors-série d'Inexploré qui sortira le 14 octobre, qui est précisément consacré à cette question. Moi, je viens, avant d'avoir fondé l'INREES, du reportage de guerre, donc je suis aussi habitué des tourments de cette planète. J'ai vu des conflits, j'ai vu ce que c'est que la réalité de l'opposition de pays ou de gens qui résistent à un envahisseur. Donc je voulais essayer de confronter des gens comme ceux qui sont ici ce soir. Il y a Laurent Gounel, par exemple, qui fait partie des gens qu'on a interrogés dans le magazine. J'avais envie de poser des questions à ces gens-là pour leur demander, est-ce que vous êtes pessimiste, est-ce que vous êtes optimiste, comment est-ce qu'on peut être lucide et à la fois continuer à avoir de l'espérance par rapport à la société dans laquelle on vit. On a interrogé 18 personnes. Ça va de Samuel Pizarre, qui est un grand avocat international, qui s'est impliqué dans des affaires politiques, mais qui se trouve aussi avoir été un des plus jeunes survivants d'Auschwitz. Il a passé de l'âge de 14 ans à l'âge de 16 ans, 2 ans de sa vie dans les camps de concentration. Il est devenu, 20 ans plus tard, conseiller du président Kennedy. On a interrogé aussi donc, Laurent Gounel, Jean-Claude Guibault, qui est un reporter de guerre, qui a arpenté la planète pendant 25 ans. Jérémy Rifkin, qui est un économiste qui est en train de modéliser aussi une nouvelle économie de demain, Fabrice Midal, Jean-Yves Leloup, enfin 18 personnes assez extraordinaires. Et ce qui ressort de façon unanime de tous ces entretiens, c'est que optimisme et pessimisme sont les deux versants d'une sorte de résignation, de se dire j'espère que le futur va être bien ou je crains que le futur soit mal, mais dans les deux cas on n'est pas actif. Et tous avec des mots très différents, nous disent qu'ils préfèrent une posture de confiance, une posture d'espérance, C'est-à-dire, ils n'attendent rien. Il y a Nicolas Hulot, d'ailleurs, qui parle du réchauffement climatique, et effectivement, quand on regarde objectivement les chiffres en matière de réchauffement climatique, c'est déjà terminé. Je suis désolé, je vais vous faire passer une mauvaise samedi soir, mais quoi qu'on fasse, si aujourd'hui on prenait toutes les mesures nécessaires pour enrayer le réchauffement climatique, c'est déjà trop tard. Il y a déjà un effet d'entraînement, de réchauffement qui fait qu'on va dépasser les 2 degrés d'augmentation et ce qui va avoir des conséquences colossales. Pourtant, Nicolas Hulot et d'autres sont... je lui ai demandé à un moment dans l'interview, je lui ai dit, mais c'est désespérant ce que vous êtes en train de me dire. Il m'a dit, je sais, objectivement c'est désespérant, pourtant, il y a quelque chose en moi qui croit encore à... Je ne sais plus comment il a formulé ça, mais je crois que c'était aux forces invisibles de l'être humain, aux forces invisibles peut-être au-delà de l'être humain de notre planète. Donc je trouve que ça rebondit beaucoup avec ce qui est dit ce soir ici. Objectivement, c'est pas terrible, et pourtant il y a quelque chose d'autre en sous-marin dont on a parlé ce soir, qui est cette conscience, qui est en action et qui peut nous ouvrir à un futur complètement inattendu. Et c'est pour ça que la position d'espérance et de confiance est quelque chose sur lequel il faut peut-être s'engager plutôt que de simplement attendre que ça vienne. Voilà, donc pour ceux que ça intéresse, nous on est aimés. J'en ai des frissons rien que d'en parler, parce que ces entretiens nous ont vraiment secoués. Je vous invite à découvrir ce Inexploré le 14 novembre pardon, dans les kiosques. 14 avril, il y aura autre chose. Pardon. On me dit qu'il y a juste encore le temps d'une question.
Je voulais juste rebondir sur ce que tu venais de dire.
Oh, pardon.
Parce qu'en fait, tout le monde ici, lorsqu'il y a eu la restitution des ateliers, tout le monde a fait référence à la joie et à l'amour. Et pourtant, on n'est pas brainwashed, on a tous conscience des enjeux extérieurs qui sont énormes devant nous. Et étonnamment, ce qui ressort lorsqu'on vient ensemble, c'est cette joie profonde, sans doute, qui n'a pas de doute, et cette confiance dans la vie. Et moi, je préfère vraiment rester ancré avec ça et agir à partir de cette confiance et cette joie qui n'a pas de doute.
Cool, au boulot.
Merci pour la dernière question. Et, I will try in English because it's a question for Rupert. I'll try to be very short, but thank you because the reason I'm here is linked to you. There's something that happened in my life in the water. Emotionally, you can feel it. It's I swim with dolphins, and something happened in the water with dolphins. And I like the picture from Alan because it's related to the podfish that you show. That is very adapted to the situation, and I felt like the dolphins. So I disconnected from. I do the free diving, so I couldn't remember. I needed to breathe, and I needed to understand what happened in the water because I felt like a pod. I was connected to them, and your work helped me to understand what happened. And my question was, have you worked with dolphins or cetaceans or animals to link some of your work for the skeptical people? Because so I will wait for your answer, but if you ever do, please call me because I would be very happy to support you with all the skeptical people with what you are describing, which is very true to what I felt. So thank you for the last question.
Well, no, I haven't worked with dolphins, partly because I live inland, not near the sea, so I've never had the opportunity to do that. I'm very interested by those who do, because clearly dolphins have a sophisticated society, they interact with each other in pods, and they're a cooperative society. I think that for most people, the feeling of bonding with another species comes more from dogs or cats or and I think horses probably most of all, because people who ride horses are intimately connected with the horse. Their movements and the horse's movements are linked. Their life and the horse's life are interdependent. And so I think for terrestrial experiences, horse riding is probably the thing that gives the closest sense of connection with another species. But I think it's interesting that those who do ride, many of them do experience a kind of telepathic link or fusion with the mind of a horse. Many people experience it with dogs. Some people with cats. Cats are a little more inscrutable. But I think that all these different experiences we can have with other mammals, which are after all more closely related to us than any other kinds of animals, are ones that show how they too are social animals, they form links and bonds, and that we can participate in them. They're prepared to include us in their group. And indeed, we include them with cases of dogs and cats, we include them in our groups. I think this is one of the really important things about the world, to recognize how our kinship with other animals is something that can happen with many different species. So I haven't done it with dolphins, but I would welcome a chance if it came my way. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you. Merci à vous tous.